When a serious crime is committed and the police need all the help they can get, there's one group of people they turn to time after time: the expert witnesses.
Expert witnesses are the golden thread that runs through cases that every single conviction needs.
An extraordinary army of men and women with the expertise to reveal the hidden clues criminals have left behind.
There are so many important pieces of evidence: paint evidence, glass, fibre evidence.
They search harder and look deeper using the very latest techniques.
If I can work out how old those insects are, that's going to give me the minimum time since death.
This is the inside story of how science helps solve some of the UK's most complex cases.
It really was becoming the last throw of the dice.
Nothing's going to bring her back, but she'd had the justice that she rightly deserved.
This is the story of the expert witness. In this programme, we look at how the analysis of phone text messages revealed an awful crime.
I would have been thinking them were her last words to me, and they weren't. They were his.
And we go deep inside a DNA lab to show how new technology helped to solve a decades-old murder.
We will keep doing what we can to bring the offenders before the courts, and every day we may get that breakthrough. We may come knocking on their door, so hopefully they don't sleep easy at night.
I've spent the last 30 years or so studying language and how people use it. We all use language, but we do a lot of that unconsciously. Conversations are really quite structured, even though we just feel like we're making it up as we go along. Authorship analysis is analysing a text to try and figure out who's holding the phone, who's typing the message.
Stoke-on-Trent, 2009. There's a fire at the Burks family home. Dad Christopher and the two children escape, but Mum Amanda is later found dead in an attic bedroom. The story catches the attention of crime journalist Chris Summers.
It appeared as if her husband had rescued his two children and got them out of the house, but Amanda, who was in the attic bedroom of the house, was not able to make it out, and it just appeared like a terrible accident.
Amanda Burks had been married to Christopher for 3 years. They had a 2-year-old daughter and an 8-year-old son. Amanda's mum, Beverly, lived close by.
This is Amanda as a toddler playing in the back garden. She was always an happy child. She's always got a smile on her face. She'd come in the room and her smile lit the room up. Just a daughter to be really proud of.
So this is a photo that I have in my room. It's me and my mum on a holiday in Mallorca when she was pregnant with my little sister Amelia. And this one is Amelia and my mum on her 2nd birthday at one of the venues that we hired out for a party.
It was the last birthday party Amanda did for Amelia.
I've got lots of good memories of me and my mum, such as making cakes and stuff, and even just little things, getting in the car, singing along, playing music. Destiny's Child, she used to love them. And yeah, they're just some good memories I've got of my mum.
When she was 18, she bought her own house, and she was doing really well for herself. She's always got big aspirations, what she wanted to do for the future.
Amanda was 27 when she died. It's a night her mum will never forget.
The early hours of the morning, that's when we got the knock at the door and said there was a fire. First thing I did was pick the phone up for ring Amanda. The phone rang. but no answer. So then I rang Chris's phone, that rang and no answer.
It seemed a tragic accident. Husband Christopher said Amanda had been enjoying an aromatherapy session upstairs and that a candle may have caused the fire, but detectives weren't convinced.
Staffordshire police were immediately somewhat suspicious of Christopher Burks. And as their investigation went on, there were all sorts of aspects of the investigation which suggested that his story didn't quite add up.
The body hadn't moved. You know, she was still found on the bed, you know, obviously very badly burned. But there was no, you know, suggestion that she'd got up, or, you know, you would have thought she'd be by the window trying to get out.
You want answers to why didn't she get out and everybody else did? How has it happened?
Relations between Amanda's mum and her son-in-law had always been strained. She was uneasy with the control he seemed to have over her daughter.
She met Christopher. I think she met him on a night out. I think from the beginning the relationship was volatile. She'd be out for a night out and I'd get a phone call and his staff have been out and picked her up because they could be for a night out and then all of a sudden he'd turn nasty with her. She'd had him arrested, but with control and domestic violence, you can always worm your way back in. And he'd come back with all these apologies and how sorry he was. She had Jack and then she got married. We weren't really happy about her getting married, but she kept telling us that he'd changed and he doesn't. She got to some point, I don't think she told us everything what went on.
When Amanda and Christopher married, they moved further out of town, but Amanda always stayed in close contact with her mum.
He wanted to move further out, but it wasn't a matter of moving. I think what it was, he wanted to break the bond with us. But the bond with us as a family was strong. Amanda used to ring me every morning, text every day.
Beverly and Amanda were in touch by text right up to the day of the fire.
I texted Amanda on the day. I'd not heard nothing off her. She texted me back and said, I don't feel like talking at the moment. Me and Chris have been talking and he's took the children out and I'm having a nice aromatherapy bath. I'm just relaxing in the bath. And we were texting backwards and forwards at this point.
In the days that followed the fire, Beverly read and reread Amanda's final text to her time and again and began to feel something wasn't as it should be.
It was when we were looking at the taxis and I thought, these taxis don't look right. You know, we always did 3 little kisses and I remember once I was in a rush and I forgot to put the kisses on. And I got a message back, where's my 3 little kisses? So it was a kind of a thing we always did. And I think it was perhaps the next day that's, you know, we'd spoke to the police.
While Beverly began to wonder if the text had actually been sent by her daughter at all, detectives received the pathologist's report into Amanda's death.
Perhaps the clincher for the police was the toxicology report that, you know, they did on the body. And crucially, it showed that there was no signs of carbon monoxide in the body. You know, you would have thought if somebody was alive and breathing, they would be breathing in smoke, which made them, you know, immediately think she's been murdered, you know, or she's at least dead before the fire.
The report went further, estimating the time of death at around 12:30 lunchtime, 12 hours before the fire. But several people continued to receive texts, apparently from Amanda, over the course of the afternoon and evening. It was clear these texts would now be key to solving the case.
Messages like WhatsApp messages and text messages can form a vital part of a criminal case. And obviously the computer forensics can these days say where a phone is when a message was sent from to a certain degree of accuracy, but what they can't tell you is who's holding the phone, who's typing the message. And this is where forensic linguistics can come in.
Tim and his team at the Centre of Forensic Linguistics told police what they needed, and then they set to work.
So we asked them to collect about 3 months' worth of text messages. We ended up with about 200 messages from Amanda Burks and about 200 messages from Christopher Burks. And what you're trying to do is analyse the known messages to set up statistical patterns of usage. So what does Amanda Burks do frequently within her messages? And then distinctive from other people. So what does she do that Christopher Burks doesn't do, and vice versa?
If Tim could identify the individual texting styles of Christopher and Amanda, then he could show who really wrote the suspect messages sent after Amanda was dead. But the analysis would take weeks. Meanwhile, Amanda's children faced coming to terms with the loss of their mum.
So I've sort of been divided into 2 parts. Before my mum died and after my mum died. Like, I still struggle with the fact that I don't have my mum here anymore. And I'm still coming to terms with the fact that she isn't here anymore. You know, it still does get to me and stuff, but you never heal. You just come to live with the fact that what's happened.
The children live with us. The children have struggled massively. Even now, they still want their mum.
Tim's analysis was now beginning to reveal crucial differences in the language and spelling used by Christopher and Amanda when they texted.
From the collection of text messages, we were able to identify those features that are consistent within Amanda Burks's messages and distinctive from Christopher Burks. And what we're able to do is whittle this down to a set of 18 features. For some of those features, she would be the only one to use those features, and for some features, Christopher Burks was the only one to use those features. So the feature examples I've got are, for example, the use of digits as a syllable substitute were a Christopher Burks feature. And there are other features which were mostly Christopher Burks. So the use of commas, for example, was something that was very rare for Amanda Burks to use, but Christopher Burks did use commas. Some features, it was about alternate spellings. So the word with, Christopher Burks was the only one to use the spelling W-I-V for with.
Tim was now able to use these findings to analyse each of the texts sent from Amanda's phone on the day she died and reveal who had written them.
At about 11:40, we get a message that contains the 4 with the digit 4, and that's a strongly Christopher Burks feature. A little bit after that, at 12:07, there's another message which has a set of commas in, which are mostly a Christopher Burks feature. Then we get to a message at 12:39, around 12:40, where suddenly we get a message which has 3 features which are more likely to be Christopher Burks than Amanda Burks. So there's the spelling of with, W-I-V, there's the use of commas, and there's the use, as a single word, for me, with the digit 4. And those are all strongly Christopher Burks features.
Tim's linguistic evidence showed it was in fact Christopher sending texts from Amanda's phone throughout the day she died.
It was him texting us. He'd had control of Amanda's phone. Amanda died at roughly about 12:30 in the afternoon, and he'd had Amanda's phone. So anybody who contacted Amanda on the phone, he was texting as if he was Amanda.
The pathologist's report showed Amanda died before the fire, and now forensic linguistics showed Christopher Burks used her phone to send texts to make it look like she was still alive.
So it was confirmatory evidence of what the police believed already, but it helped build the case, and that case was strong enough that when the different forms of evidence were presented to Christopher Burks, he actually pleaded guilty on the morning that the trial was to have started.
After years of violence and abuse, Christopher Burks killed our lovely daughter Amanda. He then showed how cruel and heartless he was by telling a continual stream of lies to everyone he spoke to, including his own children, her friends, and the police and us.
Well, the forensic linguistics was a very telling clue about Christopher Burks, because it showed that he hadn't just killed in the heat of passion. He'd killed her And then he'd set about this, trail of deceit, all these text messages to portray that she was still alive. Then he'd set this fire. Then he'd, taken his children out of a burning house. It was all very cold-blooded. What lengths would he go to get away with murder?
You're clinging on to what was the last thing we said together. I would have been thinking them were her last words to me, and they weren't. They were his. How can anybody do that to a parent? Making out as everything's fine, knowing what they've done.
Because most of our cases are murder cases or violence against a person.
The moment they said his name, I knew who he was. I thought, wow, yeah, he's going to be the man.
Windsor, 1981. Pete Byrne is just beginning his career as a junior detective when he's called in to help on a major case, the murder of Clare Walton.
Claire was 17 years old at the time of her death, a young girl with everything to live for. Just on the face of it, appeared to be a normal, happy girl, just starting her life. She went out on this particular Thursday evening and didn't come home. The body was found just before, around about 6 a.m. The guy was walking towards the railway station to catch a train into London. He saw what he thought initially was a mannequin on the footpath here, but on closer inspection, unfortunately, it wasn't.
At this point, nobody knew who the young woman was. The body was partially naked with multiple knife wounds and a cut to the throat. Police were in no doubt that this was a murder investigation. It was led by Pete's superior officer, Detective Superintendent Ken Linney.
Does her description match anyone that's been reported missing in this area?
Not at this stage, and extensive inquiries are going on to see what missing persons there are of this description.
Is it your belief at this stage that the crime, the murder, actually happened there?
No, I am of the opinion that the crime happened elsewhere.
35 miles away in the Ealing area of West London, the parents of Clare Walton were wondering why their 17-year-old daughter had not come home.
Obviously, Mum was concerned when she got up the next day and saw that Claire's bed hadn't been slept in. Was worried throughout the day, made contact with work. She hadn't turned up for work and saw a news broadcast that evening about the body that had been found in Windsor. They made contact with their local police and unfortunately it was the case that that body was Clare.
The last sighting of Clare was at an arcade where she worked. That evening she left and had begun to walk home.
At this stage in the inquiry, we have not been able to establish where she went from that time until she was found at 6:14 in the morning on the Friday morning.
How would you describe the man or the person who did this crime?
I describe him as a very sadistic type of person, somebody who could strike again.
The police knew the identity of the victim, but still had no suspects. An investigation team of over 50 officers, including Pete Byrne, began one of the UK's biggest manhunts. The investigation generated thousands of lines of inquiry, which in 1981 all had to be collated by hand.
What we've got here is pictures of the old incident room in West London, and it shows you drawers full of cards. It was pre-computers, so everything was written down and cross-referenced. So before too long, you had many, many thousands of cards. In the end, we had in the region of 250,000 cards, various files that were used, and then photographs. These top ones are pictures of Clare.
Despite the vast scale of the investigation, detectives had little proof of Clare's final moments and only a theory as to how her body was left here.
So somebody parking a car here at night in the darkness potentially would know they're close to the river. We think that he may have pushed the body over the wall thinking that she was going to go into the river.
Meanwhile, detectives did what they could to collect as much forensic evidence as possible.
And whilst Clare's body was in situ, they took tapings from the body, and this was a process where large pieces of sellotape were just placed on the body and moved up the body. And the purpose of that was, back in 1981, was to see whether there were any fibres or debris on the body, in the hope that in a day or two someone would be arrested and we could match fibres from their clothing to her body. Those tapings were then stored within the archives of the Forensic Science Service for over 30 years. What this bag contains, and unfortunately I can't open it because it's sealed, and it's sealed in a tamper-proof bag, is some of the tapings. You'll see red or pink circles, possibility that the cellular material is there. Nobody was ever arrested and linked to Clare's body, so these tapings just remained in an archive.
Over the next 30 years, experts developed brand new ways to analyse evidence, and in 2011, Pete brought in forensic biologist Edward Jarman to begin the hunt for clues to Clare's killer, all over again.
I think it does take a sort of dogged determination to work in cold cases, because often you have very limited material available to you.
Edward began by re-examining the tapings carefully kept in storage for 3 decades.
We had other samples, but this was the one of particular interest. The taping itself has got lots of debris held on it. It includes what looks like bits of grit. Some bits would look like cellular material, as well as fibres and hairs, and possible traces of blood. It was just one strip. It was about that sort of size.
With just a tiny square of taping to work with, Edward hoped to find enough DNA to build a profile of Clare's killer.
Useful forensic samples in cold cases are often not going to be large bloodstains, for example. It's often going to be just traces of DNA, and it takes determination to find those samples and submit them for profiling and then evaluate them.
While Edward and his team carried out their painstaking analysis, Detective Pete Byrne was hoping for a breakthrough in a case that had dogged his entire career.
I knew that other cases had been successful using body tapings, so I knew that there was the potential to get something from them.
Pete did not want to end his time in the police without putting Clare's killer behind bars.
Any old detective that I ever speak to, they always talk about the cases that they were unsuccessful in detecting. But I did think about Clare and her case, and say, as did other officers that I met and spoke to.
Finally, after 4 months, Edward's team had found the evidence they were looking for, a man's DNA discovered on a taping from Clare's body.
I mean, it's hugely significant when you can tell an inquiry team that you've established potentially a significant link, because then they can pursue it from the police side, and then following that we can discuss how to progress the case. With the result that we obtained from the tapings from Clare Walton's body, we were confident that we were going to establish quite a high statistical value in relation to that finding. The highest level of support would be in excess of 1 billion times more likely had the DNA come from that individual as opposed to an unrelated individual.
We get this call to say that they had a profile and they were going to launch that against the National DNA Database. The moment they said his name, I knew who he was.
The DNA belonged to Colin Campbell. He was already in prison for the murder of Deirdre Sainsbury in 1984. Just like Clare, she disappeared from West London and her body found dumped a few miles away. In November 2012, Campbell was brought in for questioning. Police were now face to face with the man they believed killed Clare Walton.
I wasn't averse to being friendly with the lady.
Yeah.
I may well have known a series of ladies.
Okay.
Clare may have been one of them.
But Colin Campbell insisted he didn't recognise Clare.
She looks like any girl I may have played hockey with. She looks like any girl I may have met through work.
Okay.
Actually, she looks like a happy person, and I'm glad about that. No, I don't recognise her.
Okay, thank you very much.
That's not to say I never ever knew her. I just don't remember her.
Campbell never confessed, but the forensic evidence was enough for the case to go to trial. Again, this time, in front of a jury, Campbell claimed he was innocent.
The only evidence that Campbell gave was his own, and he basically said, whilst he couldn't remember meeting Clare, he lived in that particular area, he may have gone into the amusement arcade where she'd been that evening, and it's possible that she may have sat on his knee. That was his defence.
But the DNA evidence recovered by Edward Jarman from body tape-ins could not have come from the minimal contact Campbell described. On the 4th of December 2013, 32 years after Clare's body was found, Colin Campbell was convicted of her murder.
Ed and the rest of the Eurofins team, obviously we wouldn't have been in a position to get that incredibly compelling evidence to put before the jury to say that Colin Campbell's DNA was on Clare's naked body.
You want to help it come to a successful conclusion. That's why you are a sort of forensic scientist. You want to contribute in a constructive fashion. So we're always pleased if our evidence has contributed to a successful conclusion of a case.
Thanks to the work of an expert witness, the case that Pete Byrne had begun his career with was now closed.
It was one of the highlights of my career to be able to say that 32 years later we got a result. But it's also important to send a message out to other families of lost people that we do not forget, and that we will keep doing what we can to try and bring the offenders before the courts. And every day we may get that breakthrough and we may come knocking on their door. So hopefully they don't sleep easy at night.